So last night I talked a lot about my story and how I got here, and hopefully we left you wondering a little bit. I came into Alcoholics Anonymous, and I got court ordered to rehab. You remember? And I told my dad, I was like, I don't have a problem. What are you talking about? And so I got court ordered to rehab, and I went into rehab, and I am cooked. The first 9 months of my sobriety, I couldn't read. I'd fried my brain to the point where I was mentally handicapped. You know, I'm the guy in the meeting sitting in the corner drooling on himself. Nobody wants to talk to me. Everybody's terrified of me. And I knew why. You know, I was self-aware enough to know why that people wouldn't talk to me. And I was just completely shattered. You know, in Dave, Frame Shop Dave, you know, when I grew up, his parents were my neighbors. I talked about this last night, but his parents were my neighbors, and they were like my grandparents. You know, I was very, very close with them, and my dad was very close with them as well, and Mom, my whole family. And so when I ended up going off to rehab, you know, they contacted Dave because we didn't know Dave. You know, I didn't know Dave. But I knew that 9 years before, you know, he was like the mystery in the family, that he had gotten sober and started going to AA. You know, so my dad took me into Dave's frame shop. And Dave, I walked in, I remember looking at him, and he had that starry-eyed look. You know, he was like excited to see me, and it freaked me out. You know, and I was just very, very uncomfortable. And he's like, yeah, man, sit down and we'll talk a little bit. And so I sat there and he was talking with me, and he just shared his experience. That's it. He just told me his story and how he got to AA, and he didn't really ask me any questions. He didn't really want anything from me because I had nothing to offer. You know, and so he just sat with me and he talked with me, and I'm just, you know, I can't even freaking blink. You know, so I'm just staring at him, and I sit there, and he's like, look, I got an RC machine in the back. I got Diet Dr. Pepper, whatever you want. He said, you can drink as many drinks as you want. You can come here anytime that you want. He said, but I got 2 rules in my shop. And he was like, don't touch anything. You're crippled. You're liable to hurt yourself. And he said, please, dear God, don't talk to my customers. I was like, all right, Dave. So I would just smoke cigarettes, you know, and then I'd just stare at his customers, you know, and just freak them out, man. And he would play these speaker tapes on on his radio in the shop, and I'd just sit there and listen to him, and I would just be so cooked, just out of my freaking mind. And, you know, I like, you know, last night we shared the first half of our story because, you know, that's the only part I listened to when I was new. When they started getting into the solution, like, I felt what they were talking about, but I had no idea what they were talking about. And if they wouldn't have shared the first half, I'm not listening to the rest because I needed to identify, you know. And so I'd listen to those tapes, and luckily when I came into AA, I was so broken that I did not know I could say no to Dave when he asked me to do something. You know, so Dave would be like, hey, be up at 5:30 in the morning. We're going to go to area assembly where we sit and we talk about the business of AA all day long. How does that sound? And I'd be like, that sounds absolutely horrific, Dave. You know? But I'd be in the driveway at 5:30 in the morning with my house shoes on because I hadn't learned to tie my shoes yet. You know, I'd be rocking back and forth in the driveway, you know, just waiting on Dave to come pick me up. Just be like, why in the, you know, am I doing this? You know? And I was so broken, I was terrified to question him. I just did it. You know, he was like, look, you know, you got no job. You can't read, you know, you got no family. Like, your family talks to you because they have to, you know, and we just deal with you because we have to. You know, you got nowhere to be. So when there's a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, I want you in that meeting. And I got sober in a small town, so there was a noon meeting and there was an evening meeting, and then there was an NA meeting after that, so I'd go to that as well. And so I'd go to area assembly and they'd be talking about the business of AA, talking about, should we use number 1 or number 2 pencils? And I'd be like, somebody get me a gun, because I'm going to shoot myself or you, and I am just out of my freaking mind. And we'd go to stuff like that, and I'd get home and I would just cry myself to sleep, and I didn't know if I was coming back mentally. I didn't know, and so I had the bright idea that I wanted to go off to college, and I couldn't read, but I thought maybe they'd be able to teach me, and I'd been to 3 years of college, and I didn't know. I had no clue, no guidance, and my parents were just so done that they were like, all right, I guess we'll send them off to college and see what happens, And so I go off to college, it's like 4 hours away, and I would listen to speaker CDs. Dave would give, this is back when they were actually CDs, and Dave would hand me like a book of CDs that would be like a weekend workshop, and he'd be like, listen to these on the way. Stay in contact with me. And it was a 4-hour drive. I came home every single weekend, and I had to call. It was like 3 turns on the way home. And I had to call my dad every single time on the way home and just stay with him on the phone because I didn't know how to get home. And I'm done, man. I'm done. And I would go off to college, and I remember going into class and just being like, I got no clue what's going on. No one will talk to me at college. And I knew why. But the only thing that I did right was every night I'd go to an AA meeting. And I'd go to that meeting, and they'd hand me how it works, and they'd be like, we're not doing that again. This is going to take a while, And so what I would do is I'd get up and I'd go to like 2 or 3 hours of class in my pajama pants and my house shoes, and I'd go into class and just be like staring at the teacher, and then I'd go back to my dorm room 11, 12 o'clock, and then I would just sleep and just hope to God that I was never going to wake up, and I have enough pills on my bedside table to kill a freaking rhinoceros, so I'm like, I'm done, and every day I'd be praying to God, like, please, 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 just take this, take me out, because I'm alone. I'm afraid nobody will talk to me. I'm out of my freaking mind, and I wouldn't get any sort of peace. I wouldn't get any sort of no warmth would wash over me, no feeling, but somehow I'd go to sleep, and I'd wake up the next day and I'd just be like, oh my God. I would be furious that I woke up in the morning and had to deal with it one more time. And I was doing that for a couple months and going to these meetings, and I remember one night I'm in my bed one more time, and I'm like, this is it. I'm not doing this anymore. And I'm praying to God and asking Him to do something, And I got a knock on my door. And no one has talked to me in 2 months other than at the AA meetings, And I go and I answer the door, and it's a guy from AA. And he's got his guitar with him. He knew I like guitars, And he said, hey man, you gave me your address in the meeting. I just wanted to come by and maybe we could jam out. And we play guitar, and I'm still alone. He's with me, but I feel alone. I've never been that lonely in my life. I'm still afraid. I do not want that guy there, but I was like that with another person. And that's Alcoholics Anonymous. If you're alone today, you feel lonely, you're afraid, you want to leave right now, welcome to Alcoholics Anonymous. Welcome to Alcoholics Anonymous. That's why we're here. Let us love you this weekend. Be here as best you can and try to be present. And, so I started, I had to drop out of college. Apparently you got to read to be able to be in college. So I dropped out and I went back home to Mississippi. And I'd just go to Dave's shop and just stare at him while he made frames all day long. And he'd just be playing these CDs. And I remember I'm about 6 months in. And he said something. He told a joke or something. And I was just like, huh? And he just stopped everything he was doing. He put everything down and he was like, did you just laugh? He's like, dude, I haven't seen you smirk in 6 months. He's like, laughter is the sound effect of recovery. And that blew, and that was the door that had just cracked open. It just barely cracked open. And I was like, well, maybe, just maybe. Because I'm going to a meeting every time there's a meeting, and they did the best they could with me. I'm asking Dave to be my sponsor. Can you take me through the inventory? He's like, dude, you're beyond human aid. I don't even know where to begin. He's like, just stick close to me and do what I do. So every time there's a meeting, we go to a meeting. When there's a conference, we go to the conference. And then I'm about 10 months sober, and we ended up going on this men's retreat. There were about 18 of us. The topic was step 6 and 7. And I don't know about you, but when I came into AA, I had a lot of stuff on my mind that, you just don't talk about. Things that I'd done that no one talks about. You keep that to yourself. And these men at that retreat were sharing openly and honestly about the worst things they'd ever done, and about how they're struggling in sobriety, sober, but they're doing it with grace and they're doing it with dignity. And that retreat changed my life. And it gave me that tiny, tiny bit of hope that maybe something's available here. Maybe if I do the things that Dave suggests of me, and maybe if I get, dive into the work, maybe, just maybe, I can get better. And I got out of college and, and I went through the steps and I started to slowly have this experience. If you looked at my first 4th step, it looked like a freaking second grader had done it. But I brought my heart to it. And if you're worried about the mechanics of the inventory and how beautiful it's going to be, and that you're going to get some kind of trophy, don't worry about that part. I brought my heart to it. I brought everything I had. And I did the 5th step, and I left some things out. I'm just going to be perfectly honest. I don't recommend that. And I slowly start going through the steps, and I get to my amends, and I remember I'm going to be doing my amends, and I was like, I was just too terrified. And one of the biggest reasons was that I hadn't done a thorough 5th step. And so I thought that my sponsor was a problem, and I needed a sponsor that was more spiritual. Dave wasn't my sponsor in the beginning. I had another guy. And I was like, my sponsor's just not spiritual enough. Maybe I should try to get somebody else. And I got another guy and, started going through the book with him. And we got to the 5th step, and I told one more thing, but I still wasn't rigorously honest. And then I ended up going to this big book workshop, and the guy ended up being my grand sponsor. But 2 guys led a weekend on the big book, and they just blew my freaking mind. And it just, something woke up inside of me, and I was like, whatever that guy's got, I'm going to do everything in my power to get it. And so I stalked him. He lived in Nashville, Tennessee, and I was in Mississippi, and I was like, he told me what his home group was. I'm going to go to his home group, and I'm going to find him. And my grandparents lived in Nashville, so I went to Nashville, and I saw the guy when he walked in the meeting, and I made a beeline right up to him, and I said, will you be my sponsor? I got to have you. And he said, I got too many sponsees right now, and I just can't work with you. I got too many. And he said, but I'll find you one today. And a guy walks in the meeting, and he's like, see that guy right there? His name's Trainwreck. Go ask him. I was like, Trainwreck? It's not what I was looking for, But I started going through the steps with this guy. And And it got to the fifth step, and you know what he did in the fifth step? He shared for 30 minutes and told me his. He told me all the worst things he'd ever done, and now I'm sitting there, I'm like, well, dude, now I feel like a sissy because I got nothing. I got nothing that compares to this guy, you know? And so I shared that stuff with him, and he's just like, all right, well, what's your first resentment, you know? And we started going through that stuff, and I ended up going out from that, and I started making my amends. And, you know, my mom came to me, and because I went back to college. I ended up getting a degree in, like, I don't know, psychology and music, like, just useless stuff, because I didn't, you know. And my you know, one of my first sponsor that was back home, he was like, he heard one of my CDs that I had from years ago, and he listened to the music, and he's like, dude, what are you doing? Because I'd stopped playing guitar like that. You know how Bill talks about, you know, those, I can't remember the quote, but the you know, how the blues stirs your imagination, you know, and I was like, I got none of that, man. I got none of that. It's just not there. And Don said, well, I want you to play guitar for 15 minutes a day. I don't care what you play, just pick it up and start. I was like, all right. So I started doing that, and I was about a year and a half sober or so, and I released my first CD. And all from doing the footwork, you know, doing the footwork. And then my mom ended up coming up to me, and she, you know, I had no idea what I was going to do for a career. I was a decent musician, but nowhere near good enough to make it. And, you know, I didn't want to put in that type of work, you know. And so my mom was like, you ever thought about, you know, being a piano technician? And I was like, what? It's like, well, I did build a guitar, you know, so maybe I could dabble, you know. And so I ended up getting this online, this comprehensive course on it, and I'm doing it for 2 years, and it's the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. There's 12,000 parts on a piano, and I was like, there's no freaking shot that I can do this, you know. But I tried. I followed the directions in the book because I knew how to follow directions out of a book, you know, and I started doing that stuff. And, you know, I went on another men's retreat, and there was this guy that was on my first men's retreat, and he pulled me aside, and he was like, hey, I'm starting a treatment center in Auburn, Alabama, where I spent the last 3 months of my drinking, and he said, I'd love for you to come help me start it. You know, come work for me. And I was just like, oh my God, like, he's like, are you up for it? And I was like, well, I'm sure they want what I have, so absolutely. You know? And so I went, and I started, you know, and when I was out there, I was like, you know what, though? I don't want to give up on this piano thing because I've worked so hard at it, but I've got no guidance. And I found a guy in the area that did it. And he's like, look, I would help you as much as I can, but I'm too busy. He's like, there's a school out in Boston. You should try to see if you can get into that school. And so I ended up applying for that school in Boston, and I got a letter in the mail. I remember it was in May. I remember the sun shining when I opened that mailbox, and I got accepted, you know. And I ended up going out to Boston, and there was this place, halfway house in the middle of the city called the Hope House. There were 180 guys that went there, and so I would just get in there and be like, guess what? I'm your sponsor, you know. And I would take them to the meeting, and, you know, we had a big book. I led like a big book workshop every Monday night. We had 25 guys that would come over, and my other friend, he would cook dinner, and we would just like go through the book, and like, it was just an unbelievable experience. And while I'm there, I'm in school, and I hate school, man. But I'm going there, and like, I want to learn for the first time in my life, and I'm soaking up all this information. And because of AA, and because of coming to AA, I got this childlike faith, man. And you know what? I was like, you know what? I don't want to be just some regular old piano technician. Like, I want to be the best of the best, you know? And I can remember sitting around with the people in class, and we were like, what do you want to do with this, you know? And I'm like, I want to be a big deal, you know, honestly, you know. And I was like, I want to work for famous people. You know, my dream, like, I'd freaking love to work at Carnegie Hall or something like that. That would be really cool. But it was fleeting thoughts, you know. I'd got my brain back. There was nothing more of a miracle than that to me. And so I went to school for 2 years there, and then I got this internship in Los Angeles. And I go to Los Angeles, same thing. I'm going to these meetings. The AA there was incredible, and I got an internship at the #1 conservatory in the country, on the West Coast, and I'm going there, and I'm doing concert work, and like I'm getting my hands dirty, and I'm training under one of the best techs in the world, and I get out of that internship, and I got a job offer in New York, and so I go to New York, and I'm working there, and like I'm excited, man. I'm starting to work with people there, and my home group is like the best group I'd ever been to, and we're like super active in the book. We're going to detoxes, treatment centers. We're taking all these guys through, and I'm on fire, man. I'm on fire, and I ended up getting another job in New York. It was like my dream job, and I'm sitting on the stage at Carnegie Hall. When I was 7 years sober, and I'm sitting there working with the biggest stars in the world. And my boss was the #1 technician in the world. Everybody knew him in our world. Everybody knew him. And I'm training under this guy. And we're having lunch one day, and we just had surface level conversations, like, how's your family? How's the weather? Blah, 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 blah. Boring, just like, whatever. And then somehow it came up. I'm 7 years sober at this time. Somehow it came up, and it came up that I was sober. And he's like, wow, like I had no idea. Like, he's like, tell me about it. What happened, And I was like, are you sure? Like, because this is going to change our relationship, And so I started talking with him. I tell him about it. And he's like, man, that's freaking amazing, man. And we talked about God every day at lunch after that. He was a very spiritual guy, a religious guy. Same thing, if you get in the weeds. We started talking about God every day, and he was telling me about working with artists. He had worked for the President of the United States a couple times. He'd worked for everybody, And so we're talking, and he's telling me how to do this job. He's like, you think your job is working on pianos, don't you? He's like, your job is to work with the artists and make them feel comfortable. He said, when they walk in that room, your job is to be of service to them. It's got zero to do with the piano. You need to have enough skills to know how to achieve what they want you to achieve. But he's like, if they're thirsty, you get them a drink. If they're nervous, you comfort them. Your only job is to be of service. It's got nothing to do with your ego. This has got nothing to do with you climbing the chain in the business. This is everything about helping them. And I started doing that, and my career just got bigger and bigger and bigger. I ended up working for the Pope. The Pope came to Madison Square Garden, and I'm freaking working for the Pope. And then I got this email, and I ended up sending this email to Stepping Stones, which is where Bill and Lois retired. It was like the retirement home out in Katona, New York. And I sent them an email just because they had an event every summer, and if you don't email and get a ticket, there's not enough space on the property. So I sent out the email to go work there, or to go attend the thing, and they saw my email, and they're like, piano, whatever. They were like, do you work on pianos? Like, is that your thing? And they're like, can you come and tune Bill Wilson's piano? Bill Wilson, if you're new, is a co-founder of AA. And so I'm in this house working on Bill Wilson's piano. I didn't charge nearly enough, but I was there. And I'm working on this piano, and I'm like, dude, this is insane. And it was all because I brought my heart to this. And I did my best to work with others, and God took care of my life. This whole session that we're talking this morning is on came to believe. That childlike faith You know, God created me in his own image, and my biggest mistake was returning the favor. We got a big God out there. We got a really, really big God out there if I let him do his work. You know, and from there, I ended up moving off to San Francisco. I was a chief technician at the school out there. And then I ended up coming back to New York. I came on a retreat like this, and I moved to Aspen, Colorado. I lived there every summer. You know, I was in Tennessee for a while. I was in Boston, whatever. You know, I've lived in 13 different cities, working on the best pianos in the world, living out my dream. And I ended up going to Austria to work on some pianos out there. You know, I've worked with the best musicians in the world. You know, I worked on every TV show in New York, you know, and just having this seemingly unbelievable life. And the reason that I share that with you is to prove the power of God. But more importantly, none of that treats alcoholism. None of it. And what happened to me, and I'll share more about this later this weekend, but what happened to me is I started to make work my higher power. You know, I never left AA. I never stopped working with others, but AA was second in line. You know, AA was second in line. And so what we're going to talk about this weekend is what now? I've had this awakening. I'm starting to work with others. Now I've got the job. Now I've got the wife. Now I've got the car. Now I got all this stuff. And I'm dead inside. And I can't imagine that some of you aren't right there right now. You know, I'm talking to the guys with 7, 8 years, 9 years, 10 years. You know. And what I did was I made AA second. Again, I never left AA. And thank God. And I don't even think I did anything wrong. You know, I don't fault myself for it. And I'm super happy that I went through this experience. But I got defects of character coming up that are killing me. Killing me. And I'm going to try to talk about this weekend how to get back in there. You know, and I'm alive again. And I'm on fire again. And I hope to God it stays, but I know if it drifts, I can come back. So I'm going to hand it over to Ephraim. And I you know, if you're nervous and you're like, man, I don't know what to do this weekend. This is weird. Just dive in. You know, just let it work. Just let this thing do its thing. You know, and if you got anything on your mind this weekend that you just are terrified about, you have never told anybody, you know, pull somebody aside this weekend. We're here for you. So I'll give it to Ephraim.
My name's Ephraim. I'm an alcoholic. I wanted to talk a little bit about awakening, and that's what we were talking about last night. Telling where we were, you know, like where I come from and all that, and then I ended last night, and I got over in the room, and I was thinking about how it went. You know, whenever you're asked to tell your story, there's 3 stories. Dave would say there's the story on the way to the podium in the car in your head. You know, I'm gonna say this. I'm gonna hit him with this. Oh, that's gonna be good. And then there's the story at the podium. And then there's the story when you get home and you're like, damn, I should have said this. I forgot about that. And it's like, so I was doing that last night, and I was like, man, you left off in prison. And now you got to spend the night in prison. So all night you're going to be in prison. And so it's like, okay, I need to get out of prison, you know. And but what happened was I had a spiritual awakening in prison, but I didn't know it. I didn't know that. The big book talks about educational variety of spiritual experience, slowly over time. And that's what I had. I started to wake up. And today, you know, I would call them God winks. It's like these little signs, but you have to be awake to it. You have to be paying attention. I didn't know that. Nobody explained it. I wasn't raised like this. I don't know anything about it. I got no tools. And but when there was a guy I was locked up with in a county jail. His name was Timothy Payne, and I'll never forget this. You do a lot of talking in there, you guys know. And but I remember this one conversation I had with him where he said, I can't remember what brought it up, but somehow we were talking about this, and Timothy Payne was the shot caller in the pod we were in. He ran the zone. And me and him were talking one-on-one, and he said, man, every single one of us has a whisper. And that's what he called it. He said it's a whisper, and it's deep down inside every one of us. He said, you've been doing dirt so long, you can't hardly hear it, but it's there. And he said, tonight when you catch a rat, I want you to listen for it. And I kind of blew him off. I'm like, come on, man. I ain't with all this jailhouse preaching shit, you know. And if he would have came to me and been like, do you trust Jesus Christ, your Lord and personal Savior? I would not have even, I would have ran. But because he said to whisper, it was less aggressive, I guess. But I laid down that night and my world was crumbling apart, you know. And I just kind of, I just, for some reason, I was like thinking about it, you know, like the whisper. And I was like, you know, is it true? Is it not true? Is it true? You think I have that? And deep down in here was something. It wasn't like a voice, like schizophrenia. That'd be different, you know. But it was like I felt this yes. This is yes. And then I thought, boy, you really fried your brain. He's in your head. Don't, you know, it's not. But I tapped into that, and something in me woke up to this idea that there is a whisper. And so I became a seeker. Just opened up a little bit to start seeking. And I didn't know what that was. And I still had prejudices against the God idea. But I did start seeking. And I was seeking, I was just open, talking a lot to people and trying to, there were guys in there that were really connected to the power, you know, singing Amazing Grace, echoing against those brick walls. And it was some beautiful things was in there. I found that when I was in there, I had nothing left. You know, I'd call home and they were like, we're having a yard sale. Oh, yeah, where y'all at? Your house. We're selling all your shit. You know? And it was like stuff like that. And I'm like, damn, you gonna sell it? Even when I go home today, I'll find a lamp in like my sister's house. I'm like, that's my shit right there. But I let them keep it. But, you know, I was getting, my son was born. I missed all that. My girl got married. You know, the one that I thought was going to be there when I got out. She got married. My son got a new dad, you know. And it was just, I was struggling in there. And I didn't really know how to pray, but it would be on me. The madness, the terror and madness would be on me. And about, you know, somebody else is raising your kid, you know, like how you going, you know. And I'd say, God, you take them. I can't do it. I'm locked up. Like, there's nothing I can do for them, you know. Well, I'm making $17 a month working for prison maintenance. What, you going to send them $3? You know, it's like I can't do nothing. And so I kept doing that. God, you take them. When it'd get on me so loud, and I'd say, God, you take them. Take her. Take my son. You take care of them. You know, take good care of them. Don't let nothing happen to them. And my sentencing, I was waiting to get sentenced, you know. I need to share this. If anybody goes in front of the Fed judge, it's going to be months. They sentence in months. I didn't know that. They should have gave me a heads up. Because when they were giving me my sentence and the judge says, we hereby sentence you, and it goes in slow motion. And they said 38. I thought it was years. You know, I was like crumbling, you know, 38 crumble. And then he said months. And I was like, oh my God, yes, 38 months. I could do that. But, you talk about. But it was like I had that kind of stuff going on. And I was trying to get in touch with the power I didn't understand. And the big book talks about, you know, I learned this later. The big book God was working in my life, but you don't see it when you're in it. You have to look back and then it becomes aware to you. But he was working deep down inside every man, woman, and child as a fundamental idea of God. Now that boy called it the whisper. And it was in me. So the big book confirms it. Then the big book talks about, just start with something. However limited your belief is, it'll work. It's enough to make an effect and a contact. And so I didn't have much training, but my mom and dad were hippies, and they used to listen to Janis Joplin. And Janis Joplin has this song, and it'd say, "Oh Lord, won't you buy me a Mercedes Benz? My friends all drive Porsches, I must make amends." And so I would walk the yard, and that song had the word Lord in it. And so I would do that song in my head when I walked the yard, and that was my prayer. And that's all I had. That's all I had to work with. I would do that. And the big book later, it says, well, God don't make too hard terms for those who seek. He don't make too hard terms. It's like, man, hey, if it's a Janis Joplin song, I can work with that. I can work with that. Just bring it to me. Let me just open up to it. Be willing. And what was also happening, I didn't realize this, but some people were writing me letters. And if you ever been locked up and you get, how it's a big deal to get a letter. Somebody ain't forgot about you. And so I was getting letters from people that were in AA. And there was this one lady, she was in Al-Anon, Barbara Livingston. And Barbara had known me since I was a kid. She'd been seeing me get in trouble all my life. And they sent me to this church lock-in one time. Y'all ever been to one of those? It's like a weekend where they lock all the kids in the church. I got drunk and high at the lock-in. I got in big trouble. I was like 13. And she had to drive me back from New Orleans, like a 5-hour drive. I'm in the back of this old Jewish lady. She's driving the car. It was terrible. But so she'd known me all my life, and she was writing me letters telling me about the AA clubhouse in our hometown. And she would send me pictures of the progress. And if you get, a letter is one thing, but if you got a photo back then, if you got a picture, it was huge to me. And I'd be telling my cellie, look, man, look. And he'd be like, bro, it's a building. I'm like, yeah, but they love me. They love me. They ain't forgot about me. And I'm an institution kid. I've been in 13 institutions by the time I was 25. And I was getting ready to be released from this institution. And even though I was trying to make contact, I was terrified. And I had made my mind up that, look, I'm an institution kid. When I go in the institution, I'm star student. I'm good. When you release me, I crash and burn, and it's fast. And my time out is getting shorter, and my time in is getting longer. So I'm running out of time. And I was really my mind was like, just leave me in here. Just leave me in here. I'm good in here. I can do routine. I know how to do time. And but they ain't going to leave you in there. They're going to release me. And so I got into this halfway house, and I started going to meetings. I remembered the letters, and I just said, well, I'm going to try to go to meetings. And then the halfway house, I would walk. I got special permission. You can go to work, come back to the halfway house. Well, they gave me permission. I could walk to the meeting. It was about a mile away. I'd have to take a change of clothes because I'd be sweaty and, nasty. I'd change clothes. And I'd go 30 minutes early. I stayed in the meeting. I'd 30 minutes late. And I started meeting some people. And now, look, I was not sold on sponsorship. I got trust issues. Huh? And I ain't working the steps because I got stuff that I can't, it's like the streets say, keep your mouth shut. You don't tell nobody, as long as you don't admit to it, you can't be charged with it. Or you can be charged, but you can't be convicted. And so I kind of had that mentality no, I'm not doing that stuff. Make amends? No, I'm not doing any of that. So I was going to go to meetings. That's what I was going to go to meetings. If you're the real alcoholic, I suffer. I didn't know this till later, but I'm suffering from a spiritual malady. Okay? The only thing that will solve my spiritual malady is a spiritual program of action. Okay? Spiritual program of action. It is not a spiritual program of abstinence. Putting the plug in the jug, just don't drink, does not work for a guy like me. I get crazy. And that's what's happening. I'm in that halfway house. I'm going to meetings. And look, I can do all right at first. I got a job making $10 an hour. Some people started talking to me. I was making some relationships in the fellowship of the meetings and stuff. Some of my family was talking to me. So my life kind of got a little better. But then it turns. And all my blessings start to become burdens. And it happens quick for me. That great job, what a miracle. I just got a job in a factory. Turns into, they don't pay me enough. They just ain't paying me enough. It's a freaking check. They take taxes, benefits. I ain't getting nothing. Maybe you can flip it. That was always my thing. Yeah, every time I got a check, my mind would say, flip it. You can make 300 turn into 600. 600 turn into 1,200. I never could do it. By Monday, I was broke. and look, what's so crazy is, I'm out there calling myself a hustler. You're a hustler, boy. I'm a hustler, yeah. But Monday, I'm the only one that got hustled. Yeah, you're a hustler. You hustled yourself again. You're terrible at hustling.
First place.
But my blessings started to become my burdens. And the people in the meeting, I start thinking they're full of shit. I'm like, and so I'm just going to be honest with you, where my mind started to go was, there were some people in the meeting, I was like, I think they still smoke weed. They're probably doing some medical maintenance. And I reached out to one of my guys. Well, actually, they found me. I got out and they found me. And they're like, hey, man, just wanted to check in with you. Let you know you're still on good terms with us. If you want to jump back in here with us, we're going to make some money. We're going to get on our feet. You're going to be good. So here's what I did. I didn't tell nobody about this one. I claimed some kids on my taxes that I didn't have. And I got $4,500 back on a tax return. And then I called my buddy down in Texas, say, look, I got $4,500. I'm going to wire you the money. Send it up here to Tupelo, Mississippi. I was going to bars. Now, I'm still going to meetings. I'm fellowshipping. I'm doing all that. And at night, I'm going to bars, not drinking. I get a water. And I'm scoping out these bars to see where I'm going to start, slinging dope again. And that was the best I had, but I needed to get on my feet, and I wasn't really sold on that AA stuff. I was like, this way. And it's so crazy because I say when I was locked up, I'm like, God, you take my life. And as soon as I get out, I'm on the phone going, hey, what y'all doing? Well, here I'm about, you need to do this, you need to do that. And it's like, who's running your life here? And I ended up going to a conference, okay? I didn't want to go. Somebody talked me into going. And I ran into a guy that I grew up with. We grew up on the same street, know all the same people. We've been doing the same stuff, sitting at the same table, getting the same dope, talking to and all this. And so I'm close to this guy. We were like brothers. And so I'm telling him my plan. I've been talking to, so-and-so down in Texas. And, I got this coming up. And I'm about to get on my feet. Life's going to be good. And he's like, I remember him looking at me like, what the is wrong with you, bro? Like, what are you talking about, dude? And that guy, he had been sober when I went in. He got sober like 3 months later. So he'd been sober this whole time. He's fresh-skinned and glowing. His life had changed, and I knew that. I could tell by just looking at him, the way he talked. But this is what he told me. He said, man, why don't you get a sponsor and work the steps? And he said, why don't you call my sponsor, Dave, and he'll even take you through the steps like I did. And I don't know why, but it was like, I never thought about that. I don't know. I was like, well, if it worked for him, maybe I'll try it. So I called my boy in Texas. I said, look, just pause. Don't, I'm still thinking here, but let's pause on this. And I took the money and I moved back home. Now, I was moving back home. This is the place where I did all my dirt. I know all the people. It's like, man, I'm about to move back home, man. This is sketchy. And so before I made the move, I called the guy, Dave, and I said, look, I'm moving back home. I'm really nervous about it. I know everybody. Everybody knows me. I got a reputation up there. And so I was like, I'm going to need a temporary sponsor just to help me, transition. And he was like, sure. And so I made the move. I took the money, instead of sending it to Texas, I moved back home. And I started meeting with Dave. And Dave was like, here's the things we're going to do. We're going to meet once a week on Sunday. We're going to go line by line through the big book. We're going to go to meetings. And I'm kind of like Matthew. I just started doing what he said to do. And really, the 12 steps don't really need my approval to work. None of this really needs my approval. It just needs me to do it. Spiritual program of action. Do the work. And so I was like, I'm going to do it just to show you it won't work for me. I'm different. Because like, I know y'all are like alcoholics, but I drink. But I cook dope too. And I do all this other craziness. And I'm different. My situation's different. I was an ANDA when I got here. I'm an alcoholic and a drug addict. Kind of put myself up here. All y'all down here. I never wanted to be on the same level. Now I'm just an alcoholic. I come in the meeting, I'm just an alcoholic. But I was always trying to separate myself. I didn't know that was part of my disease that does that. It's constantly trying to get me to separate from you. It does not want me to be connected to you. It definitely doesn't want me to be connected to the power. And so it's always in the back of my head trying to pull me away. And so I start meeting with Dave, and I'm doing the stuff that he says. He says, do dumb shit, like be the greeter. I want you to greet people at the door. I'm like, I don't even like people. Why do I want to greet people at the door? And he's like, just do it, And so that's what I would do. That's how I met him. I was the greeter. I'm greeting people. And some of that stuff just started to change my life, He would tell me, meet him at the frame shop. I'd go to the frame shop. Matthew'd be rocking in the corner. Dave would be chain Dave would be chain smoking cigarettes at the time. When I went to prison, I went over the top with health and fitness. I was one of those guys like, I'm no sugar, no sweet, no bread, no pasta. It's like, you were just snorting coke off a public toilet. Like, what are you talking about? But I started going, and Dave would chain smoke cigarettes, and I would sit on this stool, and he'd be across the table, and no matter which, I'd lean this way to try to get out of this, and it would just go like, the smoke would go like this, and he'd be over there reading the book and laughing at his jokes, and I'm like, what the fuck? And I'd lean this way, and the smoke would go like this. And he'd have one in the ashtray burning, and he'd be lighting up another one. And I was running at the time. And I'm like, dude, this is killing me. And but I started doing the stuff that he asked me to do. He'd say, we're going to do a third step prayer on our knees. I'm like, I don't really feel comfortable getting on my knees with another person. And he said, that's fine. Let's get on our knees now. And it's like, damn, bro. So I'm on my knees. And look, I'm not feeling it. Like, I didn't know anything was happening. I didn't have like burning bush experiences. So he was like, let's write out inventory. I got trust issues. I don't want to write out inventory. Let me tell you something. This is to clarify something. I came into AA with trust issues. Didn't trust a soul. Everybody in AA was trying to help me and guide me the right way. Everybody in there is trying to pour into me, show me an example, be good. And I'm telling them I got trust issues, okay? Let me tell you about Moon. Moon was a guy I grew up with. I don't know Moon's real name. I don't know his last name. Moon said at one point I was doing real bad. I had lost everything. All I had was my car. I was living out of my car. It wasn't even mine. I borrowed it from my sisters. Moon said, I can get ice out of Memphis. It's like a pound for $4,500, something like that. He said, I can get it. I sold my sister's car. Okay? This was my plan. You're going to like this. I sold my sister's car, $4,500. I gave the money to Moon to go get the ice and bring it back. It was going to be a 4-hour trip. He left, and this is everything. I just sold my house and my car at the same time. Like, I got nothing left. I'm letting it all ride on Moon. And Moon at midnight is supposed to be back, and he ain't answering the phone, and he ain't back. Do you know what that feels like? I know you do, because it went quiet in here, And at 2 a.m, my buddy Tony's like, I don't know if he's coming back. And dude, it just sinks into your stomach. And it's like everything I got, I was like, he would never do that to me. Moon would not, he knows how bad I need this. Like, he would not do this. And at 6 a.m., he still ain't back. We ain't heard from him. And my buddy Tony's like, dude, he ain't coming. He ain't coming back. And I lost, that was it. Like, after that, I was done, you know. Now I'm in AA talking about I got trust issues. You didn't have trust issues when you gave that money to Moon. When you were calling in South Memphis and they were saying, meet me around the back of this shotgun house and have the cash on you. And here I go, okay, I'll see you right back. It's like, no, you didn't have trust issues. I had trust issues in the wrong spots. I trusted people way too much. I need to learn how to trust y'all. And that's the way it is. It's like, none of this stuff makes sense to me. I don't understand it. I have to get in here and start doing it, and I'll look back on it and have some understanding. That's the way God works. It'd be great if God came to me and was like, hey, look, here's the deal. You're going to go to the feds. You're going to do some time. You're going to get out. But your life, like Matthew described, is going to be incredibly more wonderful when you 10 years from now. Are you ready? And I'd be like, hell yeah, give me the sentence. But he doesn't. It doesn't work like that. He's like, you got to trust. You got to put in the work, do the program of action, and you'll look back, and then you'll understand. And that's why they call it awakening. And it's still happening today. I'm still battling with agnosticism. That's why they got a whole chapter called We Agnostic. Not we believers. We agnostic. I still have it today. When I was on the plane flying here, we hit turbulence. I got agnostic. I ain't gonna lie. All I could think about is the wings being ripped off the plane, and I wanted to write my kids letters on my phone. I was like, I love you. I'll never see you again. And it was like, and the only thing that came to me was, God either is or He isn't. What's your choice to be? And that's the way that's the way it is for me. It's like God either is or He isn't. What's the choice to be? I'm gonna say this. I was around the 9th step. I'm meeting with Dave. It came up about the money. Tax money. Remember the tax money? So we got to the 9th step. Now I'm on federal paper. I was on paper for 3 years after I got out. So I'm on paper, federal. And the way me and Dave didn't talk the same words. Like, I would say things and then he would say things a little different. And so, like, I brought up about the money. I told him about the money, you know. And the reason I told him about the money is because I tried to do it again the next year. $6,500. I'm actually in the book now. And I'm trying to do it on the slick. And they sent me half the money, and then they were like, we need to see some school records to send you the other half. And I freaked out. I was like, oh, God, you're caught. And so I went to Dave, and I'm like, oh, man, I really fucked up. You know, like I did this deal. And I was on the amends, and he was like, you got to pay that money back. And I said, I can't pay that money back. And he said, well, you stole it. I said, no. I did not steal that money. They mailed me the check. See, that's what I mean. Like, in AA, they talk different. It's like, no, man, I didn't steal it. They mailed the check to my house. You know, like, they gave it to me. Shoot. You know, they gave it to me. And he was like, he said this. He said, no, you committed tax fraud. And that's a federal offense. And it like, whoo, the way it hit me, it was like, tax fraud? Damn, that sounds terrible. Federal offense. You know, the way he said it made it just real ugly, you know. Like, the way I was in my head, it was like, nah, they mailed me a check, and it's my money, you know. But no, that's not what it's called. Tax fraud is federal offense. And I'm on federal paper. So this is not good. This is not good. And I was sitting there, and nothing really. I was ready. I was like, okay, I'm done. I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it. And this little whisper, that whisper says, you haven't even thought about drinking since you started meeting with this guy. You hadn't even thought about it. And that was important for me because I spent every minute thinking about it. How am I going to get it? How am I going to, it was like consuming, all consuming. The time I woke up to the time I go to sleep, I just always thinking about it. And so it was just kind of like, I'm gonna keep going. And now look, I didn't like call the IRS right away and be like, hey, I stole your money. I didn't do that. I wrestled with it. I knew what I was supposed to do. I couldn't fool myself anymore. Just like right now. It's like some of y'all might know what you're supposed to do. But I just didn't want to do it. I was scared, you know. And I ended up calling. Back then you could call them. I called this 800 number. It took me about 2 weeks to do this. I prayed up just like they had told me to do. I prayed up, and I just stepped out there, you know, because I'm going to tell this story about you go to the circus and there's a tightrope act. Some of y'all may have heard this. There's a tightrope act. You're in the audience, okay? And in this situation, the tightrope guy is going to go across the tightrope pushing a wheelbarrow. Okay, now I'm in the audience. I'm watching. I believe it can happen. I believe he can do it. Okay, in the audience, the tightrope guy points down to me and says, "Come get in the wheelbarrow." Now, there's a big difference in belief and then stepping into that wheelbarrow. You know, faith. And so that's what this took. So when I called the IRS, I was getting in the wheelbarrow. It's a whole nother level, you know, to get in the wheelbarrow. And so I called the IRS, and they, in my mind, I had 100 different scenarios of the way that was going to play out. None of that went the way I thought it was going to. They didn't ask who the kids were. They didn't ask, why'd you do that? They didn't ask, did you know this is a federal crime? And all the lady said on the phone was, looks like you do owe us. She said, would you like to set up a payment plan? I just got out of prison. I ain't got nothing to give. She said, well, what can you afford? And I said, $75 a month. I figure I could rake leaves or something, you know, for $75 a month. And I needed to get clean of this because Dave had told me, you know, like, how free do you want to be? How free do you want to be? Do you want to get in the wheelbarrow or do you want to stay in the audience? And so I set that up, $75 a month, and I paid all that money back. My whole sobriety has been like that. And through that, it's an awakening to that God is taking care of me. If I'll just let him, you know, if I just let him, if I get in the wheelbarrow and let him drive, God will take care of me. I got much more stories where I'm letting go and letting him take care of me. Just like you asked him when I was in prison, it's like you asked him to take your life. Stop tying his hands. And then I'm going to close with that. Thanks.
Hey, so we're going to take 15 minutes and come back. We had a long breakfast. Come back here. I know you guys want to go outside. We'll do that after lunch for that session, and then we'll do everything else outside. If we can come back in here in 15 minutes, but let's whisper the Lord's Prayer. You want to take us out, Chris?
We're going to stand or circle? Oh, what? Circle. Still? All right. Whisper. Yeah. What are we doing? Stand up.
Stand up. Or let's circle up. Why not? Circle up. So we'll come back 11:15.